This is so stupid. It's the warning that BBC News puts up ahead of a report about Spanish police confiscating a collection of hunting trophies in Valencia. And these are the images of that collection, which the BBC finds so horrifying. Just for context, these are people looking at the same thing in London's Natural History Museum. And this week, an auctioneer in Yorkshire is selling hunting trophies for hundreds of thousands of pounds. So, what are hunting trophies? Why are they popular? And is BBC News out of step with modern culture? I chat to my dad about why we hang trophies on our walls. Regular viewers will know he specialises in the evolution of human behaviour. He starts with the dinosaurs.
Take, for example, the famous fossil Dimetrodon with this great fan of a back, of the spines on the back, which it used for thermoregulation, we think. But I bet it was also for display. And so you can't really say this mammal was the first to cheat slightly by announcing what he hasn't got.
Then he moves to the chimps.
Jane Goodall, who is a famous primatologist, she had this group of habituated chimps, and she was elected an honorary chimpanzee, and they took no notice of her. And she had a character called Mike, who was bottom of the heap. He was the omega male, and in fact he's bald in places because the others had pulled the hair out of him. Now when chimpanzees display, they get over a branch and thrash it on the ground and erect their hair and go hoo 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 and make a terrific racket, and everybody says, oh, it's only old Mike, just shut up, give him another bite or cuff his ears. And one day Mike came through a camp and picked up a couple of empty kerosene cans, and he dashed through the camp banging these, making a terrific hullabaloo. The alpha males fled in a body, and he became alpha just by this one chance. But that is a classic dishonest but highly successful display using their rituals. People hang horns on their walls to show what a good shot they are and how brave they are in facing animals, but there are also those who ape them, if that's the right word. And those who actually shot that animal have reason to be proud of it and announce it. But there are many, many more who will pretend that they shot that animal. And that is what they call a dishonest display in biology. The classic one, of course, is in Three Men in a Boat, of the arguing over who caught the largest salmon, which was stuffed in a case on a pub wall. And eventually it was demolished and found to be completely artificial, so nobody caught it.
Actually, it was an 18-pound, 6-ounce Thames trout, not a salmon, of which Jerome points out that trout was plaster of Paris. Our auctions expert, Diggory Hadoke, is more warm about people who hang trophies on their walls.
I think what a lot of people who are not particularly aligned to the hunting sport or hunting industries would see what the more acceptable side of taxidermy being quite a dramatic big set of horns with a skull, neatly cut. So it's that dramatic juxtaposition of bleached white and a big dramatic set of horns from a buffalo or a hemsbuck or a waterbuck or an old gower, something like that. Something which is almost a piece of dramatic sculpture in its own right, which if you hang it on a nicely painted wall in a contemporary colour in a fairly minimalist environment with a few feature pieces, that sits there and makes a real statement and acts like a sculpture, almost a piece of modern art. And it brings something to the aesthetic of an interior design concept, which nothing else really can. So I do think we see that. I don't know if you've seen Joe Marler's recent advert of his pants range that he's doing, where he comes down the stairs dressed in his rugby player's anti-chafing, sport pants, poncing around in a very nicely decorated posh house, as he describes it, and sitting on the wall, all encapsulated on a farrow and ball wall, is a massive buffalo head. But it's a skull mount. It's a skull and it's the horns. And it's a statement piece in a very stylish piece of interior design. So I think we do get that being picked up in the market as well.
back to dad.
I think it's genetic, genetically controlled, the desire to show off in front of women and displaying the trophy of the chase is as good a way as any that I know of. There's no fossil evidence of display, but if you look around amongst your friends and relations and people you know, you'll see it all the time. It's very complicated, but it's no longer genetic, except the rewards are genetic. People feel better. And they're also in that feeling of triumph. Look at my great big bull elephant on the wall. I feel very proud of that. Other males will feel rather uncertain. I'm subservient to him. It's all a matter of social, adjusting where you are in society, which gives mating rights. And that, I think, persists today. DNA is a very delicate molecule. And in old age, one wears out because DNA doesn't replicate itself properly. Sexual selection is you choose a mate, and you've got to get the molecules together, and that means two cells uniting, and the cells die in fresh air. They've got to be in water. Therefore, one of them or other has got to inject copulation or mating, and that involves the intrusion into an individual. Therefore, you've got the whole ritual of courtship, and part of that is display. There's an interesting aside here, and that is, why do people get drunk and smoke and take drugs and so on? And the answer is they are signalling, my genes are so good at the business of life that I can afford to poison them and still do well. In fact, it doesn't always work. The target person very often sees through that. But broadly, it is sexual selection is displaying by one or other sex, usually both, and perceiving what is on display and judging whether it is genuine or not.
Many birds and animals display, and humans are perhaps not the only wildlife to display with trophies.
The shrikes are a group of birds, the great grey shrike, sometimes called the butcher bird, because it impales its prey or spare prey on thorns, and it feeds on small birds, lizards, mice, and so on, beetles. And it'll stick them onto a thorn bush spine. Most of the books say that is as storage for when it's hungry. I suspect it has a good deal of an element of display in it. A former colleague, Tim Clutton-Brock, who measured the intensity and duration of red stags roaring in Scotland, and showed that the more they roared, the less they fought. And so it saves dangerous or damaging injury to display. It's like language in human beings is a way, or talking is a way of preventing fighting.
Go back to the point at which we come down from the trees. Early humans are living on the southern African savannah, and two aspects of our lives become tremendously important.
In the last 500,000 years before, we had assumed an upright stance, but we still had a very ape-like skull and a very small brain. And the evolutionary pressure then was on an enlarged brain, because you need, the bigger the brain, the more people you could know and their social interactions, and that was very important in the group. And we can reckon that chimpanzees know, I think it's about 60 individuals. Human beings know 150, the famous Dunbar number, where it was described. Knowing a number of people who was on your side, who was against you, was immensely important in establishing your social position. And equally important was to show that you had killed a big animal. And then suddenly all the women think, gosh, he's brought home all this meat and fat, which they needed, because the human brain is largely fat, and the growing infant needs a lot for its brain to grow. And unfortunately, we walk around on our hind legs. So you've got the pelvis problem. An animal with a horizontal spine has a tubular pelvis through which the waste matter and babies can be born. When you stand upright, the gut falls down into the pelvic basin, and so it needs to be a bowl, and the holes close. At the same time, the baby's head is getting bigger, and so you've got this problem this conflict of evolutionary drive. And the way they got round it is that babies are born 18 months prematurely compared with the chimpanzee. And they have to grow very rapidly afterwards. And so the nursing mother has got to, for her child to survive, must have good food provided by the game animals.
So why inedible dead skulls and trophies?
Because the meat goes off, and
so you need to continue to show off your
yes,
hunting
if
prowess.
you're going to show off, look at all these animals I have killed. It's no good showing the women round heaps of rotting carcasses, but if you stick the head on the wall, like the roebuck you shot on the wall of the shed out there, is a way of signalling and leaving them around. Some, particularly Southwest Pacific islanders, collect human skulls because they'd eaten them. The Bushmen of the Kalahari, the Khoisan, have a reverse situation whereby if a man kills an eland or a big gazelle, he won't say so, and he mustn't appear to be boasting. And so he has to drop various clues to friends who will feed him the right questions and indicate and allow slowly, where is it? And it's a race, because the man who's killed the big antelope has got to persuade the tribe to come out and collect it before the hyenas and the vultures get it.
So modesty can also be a method of display. Now something happens in early human history to the importance of showing off the kill, and that is farming.
When we spread out over the world, in the last about 50,000 years, the Aborigines reached Australia 40,000 years ago. When the game became scarce, then we started farming. And you got two sorts of farmer. One was the huntsman, who herded his game and protected them. The Kalahari Bushmen have no concept of ownership of a living animal. Ownership of a dead animal, yes, but you do not own a wild animal until you've killed it. Then the other sort of farming is growing crops, and they're two quite different things. Trying to outwit a sensitive and resentful animal is one way of life, and it's quite different from watching beans grow, which is another way.
Why do the farmers not display? I mean, some of them do, but why do they not display the horns of their cows in the same way that the hunters?
Well, they've got the living animals there for the wives to see. What I find fascinating is that farming, warfare, and religion all appear to have evolved at about the same time, and I bet they're connected.
From land ownership comes the idea of displaying the game heads from an area of land, not just the kills of an individual hunter. These images show Paul Childerley arranging animals he has shot on a driven hunt in Germany for a photograph, which is a kind of trophy display. He uses his foot to wipe the blood off a boar, and you may feel a bit shocked at that. You may feel it's disrespectful to the animal, but of course the late boar doesn't mind. Perhaps it goes to show how complicated display and trophies are to us.
You've got, again, a completely different set of motives, which instead of looking at me, look at my property, and that is true. And a third motivation, I think, is scientific inquiry. We had a neighbour here, John Willett, who had this wonderful collection, and he had all the big game heads of the world, bar 4. He was a scientist. He was interested in the evolution of
A few years ago I visited the Trophy Hunting Museum at Valdemar's Castle in Denmark, where I met the curator, Claus Olesen.
Oh, hi. Quick. Hi, Claus. Welcome. Fantastic. Are there private collections that are bigger than this?
Yes, there is.
Really?
We got one in Denmark which is larger than this.
Claus adds a fourth reason for hanging trophies on your wall, because it shows you are a conservation hero.
In the 1980s, there were about 2,000 white rhinos left in South Africa and 1,200 black rhinos. The problem with the rhino is it eats the same as 30 cows every day. So when the poachers, as the illegal hunters, shot it, the farmers were pleased because they could have 30 cows to earn money in. Then the game department saw a problem there. So they allowed the farmers to sell the old rhinos, which couldn't produce calves, to trophy hunters, so they could get some money from it. And that's how it's done today. And during the time from the 1980s to today, there is about 16,000 white rhinos. It has been gone up to nearly 20,000, but during the last 4 or 5 years, there is some increasing in the poaching. So nowadays there is shot more rhinos than there is giving birth to.
So poaching,
Through the poaching, not through the legal hunting.
so poaching is a problem, not hunting.
No, I think it's the opposite.
Since I recorded that interview, there are now 20,000 southern white rhinos in southern Africa. Meanwhile, the northern white rhino in Kenya, where hunting is banned, has become extinct. Back to Dad, and he deals with another anomaly. Why do hunters display inedible animal species on their walls?
If you put a fox mask on the wall, what are you saying to a potential mate?
I'm good at pest control. Yes, that's what it amounts to. Any carnivore, you can't eat carnivores. Well, you can, I suppose. Amundsen ate dogs in his Antarctic crossing. But the liver of a carnivore is usually poisonous to human beings with hypervitaminosis D. And so to put their masks up, like a gamekeeper's gibbet. I remember as a child seeing rows of stoats and weasels hung up by gamekeepers. I think you've got hunting for food and pest control.
I mean, there is a sense of display about fox hunting, isn't there? That I was there at the kill. I'm very good at riding horses, therefore I...
Yes, it's all the country's skill. It is a display.
This is getting complicated. It is not as simple as saying that a big head on your wall will attract a mate.
One wants to avoid eliciting the sympathy from... So if you are displaying a magnificent sheep's head against a predator, be careful that the woman doesn't think, oh, poor little sheep, and sympathise and therefore reject you for killing it. As I say, it's layer after layer after layer of innuendo and meaning.
That may be bad news for Diggory and the tiger on his wall, but what's good news for Diggory is that the auctions market for hunting trophies is healthy.
Yeah, it seems strong. I think it's strong at the moment. I'm looking at those sorts of tiger heads. You know, you'd easily expect them to make £3,500 at an auction. Good tiger skins are expensive. I mean, the last tiger skin I bought, which you probably see a bit of it on the table behind me. I paid £600 for that, and it's a faded, rather tired one. It still looks decent, still got its head on it and its teeth, but it's it's showing its age. A really good tiger skin could cost you, getting on for £10,000 if it's one that's been stored really well. There are specialist collectors of taxidermy. You see a lot of the taxidermy of cased birds by some of the more famous taxidermists, and sort of Spicer fox masks and otter masks and things like that. They do fetch decent money quite regularly, and so there's obviously quite an avid collection sort of fraternity out there buying this stuff and putting it up in their houses, I guess. I think, like all commodities, scarcity raises the value of the things in the market. So things like tigers, there are no. If you want a tiger head, you can't go out and shoot a tiger and put one on your wall anymore. So the available tiger heads are only the ones which have survived 100 years. And so to have survived 100 years is one thing. To have survived 100 years in very good condition is another thing. And to actually be well mounted and attractive in the first place is another thing. So in common with the gun market, in a way, you're looking for original quality, current condition, and then there is that little bit of snobbery attached in the collector's market to stuff that's been done by the top taxidermists like Van Ingen and Spicer and Theobald.
So you may go to the auction at Tennant's in Yorkshire and bid in the knowledge that the market is strong, and there's a link to it in the description below. But Dad has one final warning for investors in trophy heads, and that's this.
As population density rises, so we either increase fighting or we increase cooperation. And if you're feeling aggressive, the best thing you can do is to persuade somebody, your rival, to be a pacifist, and you get him out of the fight, as it were. And there has been, in my lifetime, an enormous shift from defence and warfare. I was born before the last war, and the present tide of "look at me caring." And that is an enormously powerful display.
Maybe that's why BBC journalists are so keen to extend their virtue by warning of the horrors you will find in a film about stuffed animals. They just want to get laid.